Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Dr. Ken Goes Keto, where I'm transitioning from the standard American diet to a ketogenic diet and working on my addictions on all of my little things that keep me eating sugar and flour and drinking caffeine. And I'm here with Mike Collins, sugar-free man, who has been really instrumental in helping me look at how I'm recovering and helping me work with my sugar and flour addiction. And he runs No Sugar Nation, which I will put in the a link for you. It's a wonderful place to go and explore if you're really thinking that you have some issues with sugar. And he has a wonderful 30-day challenge there, which is always what I recommend you do from the beginning, as well as maybe even getting a one-on-one coach to help you through those first 90 days. So thank you so much, Mike, for being here. And we were having a lovely discussion before we started recording, which of course, we start talking. We should always record Mike at the very beginning because I could always like edit or do anything. We always have these great discussions and then we're like, we should be recording this.
Right. Yeah, no, I know. Yeah. No, it
So
was a
we were
good talk. I mean, we were getting down the rabbit hole for sure.
Yeah, we were talking about addiction and like being an addict and how other people relate to you as somebody who deals with addiction or don't relate to you, are incapable of relating to you, and how this becomes and how it is such a dopamine dysregulation.
Yeah, so you were talking about, and I could relate completely. You sometimes you didn't like yourself. You don't like being an addict. You don't like having to make special circumstances around whatever in the culture. What it's like you got to make special food and all this other stuff and whatever. And what I was saying is like I could relate 100%. When I first got sober, I used to go to 12-step meetings and I literally, geez, to all my fellows, but I would say, I hate being with these losers. I just believe that I wasn't supposed to be there, right? I knew I was supposed to be there, but I still was not thinking that I didn't want to be there. I wanted to be somewhere else. I wanted to be different. I wanted to be better. I wanted to not have this issue, right? And then I kind of said, I'm not 100% there. In other words, I'm not 100% where I can say what I'm about to say, but I'm very close to 100%. I'm over 90%. Okay. And what I said is that about 10 years ago, I got really deep. There was a movie that came out called, I think I'm Not Anonymous or The Anonymous People or something like that. And it was all in the stuff that I was following. And two nonprofits sprung up, two big nonprofits, K Street, Washington, D.C. Shatterproof was the second one, but the first one was Faces and Voices of Recovery. And the construct was really simple to reduce the stigma, of addiction. Regular people, doctors, surgeons, movie stars had to come out. And this has actually happened in a lot in Hollywood where it's quite cool now to be in recovery. It's not a stigmatized thing if you're a movie star, right? But the part that's distressing for both you and I is that you don't really, you want to be different than what appears to be normal, where people can, use drugs or alcohol or sugar normally. And I've stopped short of it, but I'm very close to it. The more I do it, the longer I do it, the more I'm involved in it, the more I know that there has a collision that's happened in the last 3 to 5 years, 3 years really, with the Basinski Group and Metabolic Mind and Chris Palmer and George Ede, where the discoveries of the metabolic mind stuff has just come to the forefront. Well, I left the space out where we talked about what I believe is that no one should be feeling guilty or feeling ashamed or have shame because 60 some odd years ago, let me make those numbers right, Alcoholics Anonymous started with one substance, which was alcohol. And from that, the last count, there was 130 some odd 12-step programs and then treatment centers all over the world. And what happened was they learned a modality, a protocol of healing and codependency and other issues that seemed to marry or merge with the alcoholism. And back then it needed to be anonymous. The stigma was so advanced that you would lose your job and your family and everything. So they had to be anonymous, right? But not being anonymous, I believe, is the answer so that people, so that this can be considered a healthcare issue. So fast
Mhm.
forward back to the introduction of metabolic mind and the new psychiatry of metabolic psychiatry and the deep understanding from Dr. Lustig and Dr. Johnson and all these people of dopamine dysregulation and brain reward chemical dysregulation, all of them. When I say dopamine, I mean, everybody knows what that means. I mean, dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, GABA, oxytocin, adrenal glands, endorphins, cannabinoid receptors, all of the brain and body reward chemicals are affected by these substances, right? And just now, the science, you know, 400 of the world's leading experts we've interviewed on the Quit Sugar Summit, the science is very clear that sugar affects the same pathways, the same reward pathways in the body. I've been trying to think of an analogy that would be logical that some people, what I used to use, Cammy, this might be a little drastic, is that some people can handle a certain amount of poison. In other words, they call it they have a good constitution or whatever. But I'm guaranteeing that if you and I sat down and started doing shots of gasoline, I may make 3 shots of gasoline. You may make 2.5 or 4 or 5, but we would eventually both drop dead, right? And it's that marginal difference in the human body of what their dopamine regulation, their system, their biodiversity can handle that is the spectrum we need to live on. And at the end of it all, I said, I believe personally, narcissism, in my opinion, is just untreated codependency. If someone was to just compare them, it's just untreated codependency. In narcissistic recovery, everybody is handsome and charming. That's just not possible. It's only like 5% of the population. Not possible, right? And so all of these things have come together over 60 or 70 years of the introduction of the behavioral change protocol process of recovering from a substance, right? And now it's smack running right into this metabolic psychiatry where all of this stuff makes perfect sense in a more biodiverse individual person's ability to handle a substance. Okay. And the recovery processes are similar: absence of the substance and then change of the behavior that led to that. And so I'm, my attempt to the people, all hats off to the Faces and Voices of Recovery, the movie. I think it's I'm Not Anonymous, or Not The Anonymous People, I think is actually the name of it. And people that are trying to make these issues healthcare issues and not freaking anything to do with, your, shame,
Willpower.
willpower, anything even related to that. And until we get that message out and continue to get that message out, people will fall victim to exactly how you felt when we started this call, is that you felt bad that, you had to do this work, be in this place. There's no reason. If you had cancer, you would not feel bad. I mean, you would have a disease, right? And I don't not necessarily want to lean it towards ascribing this as a disease. I think it is, in a lot of ways. I think it is a spectrum on which people can handle the substances and how it affects their body
Mm, that's
and
very interesting to think of
how
it
they
that way.
use it, how they use it. Some people, they can just have half a glass of wine or half a cookie, and it's not a problem because it's not their biodiversity denotes that they can handle it. I don't know. I wanted to try and recreate the rant I went on when we were before the recording. I hope I did okay.
Yeah, you did fine. You brought up a lot of good stuff, Mike. And I think it's interesting to look at it as a spectrum of addiction, right?
Yeah.
Like, because we talk about, normal users, harmful users, and addicts.
Right.
And that kind of is on a spectrum, right? Because
Yeah.
I just know the more I learn about myself and the more I know about myself, the more I feel like I'm really way over there on the addiction part of the spectrum. And I think part of that has to do with me also learning that I'm a very sensitive person. I'm one of those, I call myself HSPs, highly sensitive persons. And I'm so sensitive to so many things that happen, like emotionally and physically and mentally. It's just learning as I go through my life that I'm that way, and then trying to process my life and live in a way that is calming and soothing to who I am. And that's kind of where I am on the journey.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I think you're not alone. I mean, everybody is trying to come to terms with, I think it may be a better analogy even than like a cancer or not feeling shame is your skin. Okay. Some people burn easily in the sun. They're lighter complected. And so they have to work around that. Right. And some people are darker skin and they don't burn at all. They, and and all those kinds of bodily human diversities are very similar. How your body reacts to X, whatever X is the same as what's going on here as, how people are reacting to their sugar, how they're reacting to their alcohol and whatever. And what happens, obviously the substances change behavior and, they stop serving you, whatever the reason you started using them to begin with, they stop serving you. But, at the end of the day, this has absolutely nothing to, it is nothing to be ashamed of, to be depressed about. It's okay, sunscreen and a hat. And that's how you handle it. And the same thing here, abstinence from the substances and then behavioral change from the process to use the substances to interrupt, to use, and we still don't know how much these things are interrupting our emotional life, our brain chemicals, our reward. We don't know. But do we want to wait? No, we want to get abstinence from these things and then, try and change. We are the rebels. And one of the things that I've found about recovering people is they are the most sincere, wonderful people on the planet because they belong to this minority of people who have changed something that is difficult to change in this society. I don't think this would be something difficult to change 20, 30, 50 years from now when everyone is aware and there's more maturity and understanding about the brain, more maturity and understanding about how these substances affect emotions, et cetera, et cetera. You know what I mean? And so it's again, this is the first time I've ever articulated this stuff in public, ever. And it's getting to the point where my friend Dr. Cammy is upset with herself because she's human and a very sensitive human at that. Why should I let that slide for other people who might be listening, and try and say, cheer up, go back to basic, give you the it's not it shouldn't be that way. And no, I'm not naive enough to believe that just talking this way can change it. But and I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. This message is not mine. It's one I'm trying to translate from people who are working a lot harder than I am at this in the drug and alcohol world.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's hard. It's hard to be feeling like I'm new in my recovery from the sugar and flour. I'm not that new. I mean, I've been in for 3 years trying to really work on it, but it's been a real struggle for me to get abstinent. That's the key. And I really do think that you have to be off the substance in order to heal and get better. You cannot have it moderately. You cannot have it a small amount. At least I don't seem to be able to pull that off. And yet sometimes I desperately want to do that, because I'm addicted to it. And I want to get some of it in there any little which way I can. But like when you think about alcohol or when you think about cocaine or when you think about heroin, you can't do that. And you can't progress in your recovery and work on really changing your behaviors and your thoughts and feelings and really finding like happiness, like finding like just being okay with who you are.
Yes.
I mean, that's what I want to be. I want to be okay with who I am, like the good, the bad, the ugly, because I do have qualities. I do have attributes. I do have wonderful things about me. But
Yeah,
man, when I think about my addictions and that part of me, that's a place that's more difficult to accept and love.
I get it. And you're not alone. Um, but And again, it can't be, I don't want to pretend like I'm naive and that the society we live in creates this kind of mimetic kind of, everyone has to be homogeneous and that the right, the best people don't have these issues or addictions, which we all know is ridiculous. It's cuts across every, sociographic category in the world. Everybody's family dish, somebody, deals with it. I don't wanna, level lower this to the point where this just pisses me off now, and that somehow we're the outcast or an addicted person or, a person that behaves badly, um, is and it obviously looks, well, I don't know, it looks worse when someone's stealing something or crashing cars or whatever, but I think that the shame comes in this particular substance that this show largely is about, is that the change in the body and the health, it's the body that people think is important. And if we're going down this road, we may as well talk about it. If the whole world is moving towards GLP-1s and they think that there is a solution there, the part that pisses me off is that we're going down the wrong road again. Like, this is bariatric surgery too, essentially. It's like deform the human body or use a drug to change something that should be like not only accepted, but it should be praised, right? You should be up on a pedestal as a strong person who is able to let drop these societal customs. That's all they are. The use of alcohol, the use of sugar and ultra processed carbon is just a cultural construct. It's not very obviously a construct that was and is meant for the human body, but we didn't know that when it worked its way into the society. We just didn't know it. And we can't be blamed for it because here we sit at this precipice of change, right? And I think there's a lot that's been done, at least in the alcohol world, and largely by celebrities who have come forward. And that's been a big boom for people in awareness and dropping in lack of stigma. You notice that very few of them talk about any drug use because that's still taboo. And the sugar stuff is the you should, like you should be able to do this. This is a willpower thing. You're weak. You don't exercise enough. You don't, you're a glutton. This is the the unwritten, unsaid rule of the
Mhm.
person who is suffering from this very simple dopamine dysregulation.
Well, and that's what society says too, right?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Yeah. It's society. These are society's unwritten rules, not yours.
yeah.
And they are mimetically inherited and mimetically, copied or ingested, and we make them their own. Mimetic means for the people, it's like there's nothing that you have that you did not get from someone else. In other words, you observed it somewhere, somehow. Okay. And these are thoughts, feelings, attitudes that we think that overweight people are less than or they're lazy, or they're slothful or whatever. And then, they don't exercise, which is all not true. None of it. Not one bit of it is true. So, yeah, it's difficult. I mean, it's a difficult point in history for you and the people that are trying to change. And me still, you know what I mean? It's like I know people kinda look down their nose at you, when you talk about the addiction stuff or you're, upfront about it. Mm, I can almost feel it as an INFJ.
Well, I guess the feeling that I kinda get is that it's almost like you're when people think about me and the addictions that are going on for me, it's almost like they feel sorry for me, like, that I have this problem.
Yeah, yeah. It runs a spectrum like it all does, it's like you can see their what do they say in the South? "Bless your heart."
Yeah, yeah.
Bless your heart. Yeah, okay, we won't serve that, or, "Yeah, you can bring your own food to this event. Bless your heart."
Yeah, it was interesting yesterday because I had lunch with my sisters because it was one of my sister's birthdays, and we were eating really well. We had some salads, and we had some Brussels sprouts for, an appetizer, which I was really pleased they weren't full of sugar because sometimes they put that maple syrup all over them and I can't eat it. But I had a few of them. Then at the end, they knew it was my sister's birthday, so they brought her like this little free little slice of, sugar item. And so she went and ate a few bites and she handed it to my other sister and she had a few bites. And then I could tell that my sister wasn't sure what to do with me, right? Like, does she offer it to me or does she not
Yeah.
offer it to me? Like, she didn't know what was the right thing to do. And she was so cute. She kind of gently said, do you want any of this? And I said, no. And she said, okay. And I just really appreciated it that, she wanted to be polite, but she wanted to also be supportive.
Right.
Right? And there were a few little berries sitting around this item. And she goes, oh, how about a blueberry? And I said, okay. So I took a blueberry and I ate the blueberry and I ate one blueberry. And then it kind of worked out well because then I felt like I could participate and I could connect, and then I felt like she was being supportive. And so I think that that's how I feel. I'm really lucky because I have a lot of people in my life that are very supportive. But on the other side, I would have people like my mother before she got too demented that was not supportive and really did think of me as somebody who was weak and who didn't have any willpower and who was making dumb, stupid decisions and, who was so unhealthy physically and, all of these parts of it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like one of the things that you're talking about where, and it may sound, my rants may have sounded like I'm getting down on the people who aren't addicts or don't suffer from dopamine dysregulation. Well, they don't sunburn. They tan very nicely, so they don't need to change, right? And so
Yeah.
what you're getting at is like they're confused also. Okay. Not only is the addict confused, the public is confused. Normal is the wrong word, but the people who don't seem to have that spectrum of dopamine dysregulation. They don't. I mean, personally, everybody's got something that they're playing with this, whatever, now social media, whatever. But they seem to not have gained weight or not crashing cars or whatever. And so those folks are as confused as the addicts as this heals in society, in each individual who has the courage to do it. And then the society as they change the norms around it. And one of the, again, I use this a lot, but it's true. The telltales of cultural change of addiction is cigarettes and drinking and driving, the cultural norms in our lifetime. So it's very simple and easy to see and understand. And there's nothing written down where somebody says, okay, we're going to ostracize all the people that smoke to this outside of the building thing. And you walk by them and feel sorry for them as they're smoking their cigarettes before they go into the office. And then the whole drinking and driving thing is like, when I was young, it was just don't get caught, and the cops are the enemies. And it was kind of everybody thought it was a dumb rule. And now the society's flipped to where the science is like, you shouldn't be drinking and driving because your perception's off and you can't drive good. And they get that, and it's a terrible thing to do that. And so we got to see that. The promise is, and look, the promise has always been there's been incremental with the celebrities change in the alcohol perception. And even not there, still there are pockets of people who judge people with an alcohol problem. But for the most part, educated, progressive people accept the idea that their friend can't drink alcohol. It's okay. Can't drink
Yeah.
alcohol. No big deal.
Yeah.
But drugs is still in the stigma world.
Yeah,
And
and
sugar
and and
certainly.
sugar is just everywhere. Sugar is just, I guess cigarettes were everywhere and alcohol was everywhere too, but I don't really feel like the the food industry has, just a chokehold because they're dishing out all this stuff that really is creating more and more of the addiction. Although I guess they did that with the nicotine, right? They had all that stuff in the cigarettes that made you want more and more.
Yeah. I mean, the more I hear about the engineering of the food, I definitely can tell that putting more sugar in it brings more business, and that's easy. I always used to say, and I still believe it, is that, everybody's so enamored with Starbucks because it, went to $1 billion company from a couple of coffee shops. And it's really easy to build an empire on an addictive substance, genuinely. I mean, El Chapo proved it, it's easy to build an empire on an addictive substance, because the body, certain bodies, not everyone, reacts to it in pretty predictable ways now, and we have the science to prove it. Uh, but
Yeah.
it's the cultural change that I think gets us down, gets you feeling bad. You know what I mean? That you, and again, the tools of community where the brave people, and that I believe with all my heart, the courageous people are challenging the norms of society and changing in ways that is, I mean, the success stories are incredible, from sugar to alcohol and drugs and everything, the people that change. And I
Yeah.
love them to death. I mean, I think they're the bravest people on the planet.
And thank God we have people out there like that.
That's right. I mean, what made sense to me 10 or so years ago was that anonymity did not work for me anymore. It's not something that benefited me in any way. It's not, you know what I mean? I was blessed to be an entrepreneur and I didn't have to worry about a job or,
Mhm.
it's like, and so it made sense to me. Right. And so that,
Yeah, I really protected my anonymity with
yeah, of course.
drinking in the medical field,
Cool.
and luckily, I was a good binge drinker, so I wouldn't be under the influence of alcohol
Right.
when I was working or hungover trying to get jobs done and stuff.
Yeah. But being, on YouTube with a show about it, addiction, as you were a surgeon, it probably wouldn't have bode well, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's a complex problem, but I don't want it to spill. The reason I kinda, again, went off a little bit because I don't want you to suffer from it. I suffered from it a lot for a decade when I first got sober. I was shamed, embarrassed, it was just awful.
So tell me about that. Are you talking about alcohol or sugar or both or what? Like for a decade, you kind of felt that way until you got more years of abstinence under your belt. See, that's where I think I'm struggling.
Yeah.
I get a certain amount of time of the abstinence going, and then I'll have a and then I just can't tolerate the discomfort and the uncomfortableness of that and working through it, like with my thoughts or feelings. And I think, like, I always want to think, like, oh, in 2 or 3 days, I'm going to have my thoughts and feelings come up. And I'm like, no, I think maybe it's more like, 4 to 6 months.
Yeah, okay. No, what to answer your question, I think it came from, like, I had a really good support group, and it came from knowing people who, judges, and the guy's probably passed by now, but there was people that were, let me put it this way, he was on the headlines every day for 6 months, and he would go to this local meeting that I would go to. And I would see these people like that, and they're very successful in their careers and life, talking about what you and I talk about, emotions and stuff. And then I got to realize that these are the warriors. These are the courageous people. These are the people who are going against this thing. But they had to keep their anonymity too, just like you. And but they were, and then when that group came along 10 years ago, 15 years to whatever it was, they just made sense to me. It just made sense. And I kind of, I guess I joined up or started speaking up, whatever. So yeah, it's and the answer whether it was alcohol or sugar, it was both. It was addiction in general. The sugar thing was more for me, 37 years ago, it was more cultural. And raising the kids was even worse. It was like there was no one to talk to about the cultural process of trying to do this behavior with those children, or myself. And I hated when I would go to a business lunch and there'd be 4 people at a table and everybody'd order, and then I'd have to explain why I ate the way I ate. We're there to make a deal, do something, sell something, whatever we were doing. It never got there hardly because I was explaining the thing, and the regular prejudices or norms came up, right? The norms of society. But what about this and what about that? You need carbohydrates, you need this, you need sugar bath, and then I'd have to go into that stuff, right? And so I felt bad about that. It's like I'm with somebody who's that we're trying to make a deal and do something, and the whole thing gets sidetracked. Or, even my parents were the worst trying to, they would, if I left my children with my father, he would have snuck them candy. He would have given them candy. And maybe even my mother. At least she was kind of accepting, but she'd have done the same thing. And the Montessori school is like, they were very, very progressive, but they did not understand what I was trying to do. Right. They just didn't
Yeah.
understand it. They wouldn't, it was a hassle for them because they had to
Yeah.
and they had to keep an eye on them when that shit came around.
Yeah.
So,
It's work and
it's
energy
work.
and effort and time and yeah, it's all
But
that
here's what
stuff.
I'm here to bless you with and all the listeners with. After a while, it's not work. The work is gone. You've done the work, mostly the social work. Sometimes emotional stuff comes up. I tell the story about Joe Niflin. She'd be okay if I told it because I think I have told it before. This woman's 25 or 30 years, no sugar, no flour, or whatever. And one of the most influential educators on the planet. And she had just come from a therapy session about a bunch of stuff, but her father had passed away and she had a difficulty with her kids because of her sugar use. She was a bitch, and that's her word. She was a bitch when she was younger. And so, like I said, she was 25 years in. And and literally in our interview on the QSS, she just kept processing with me. She just kept like being a little upset and talking about that situation. And I'm like, yo, you want me to change this? You want me to like, we can re-record. He says, "No,
Edit.
let it stand." So, you're always gonna be doing that, but you're just gonna be doing it differently, you
Yeah.
know?
All right. Thanks, Mike, for everything. I loved our discussion about
I
about
really appreciate it.
addiction, dopamine
I'm not
addiction,
sure I
dysregulation.
was good for your event because yours is the one that's supposed to be getting the help, but I think you needed that, reframe.
No, it's all good. It's all good. And our listeners will be grateful. All right, everybody, take care. We'll see you next time. Bye.